fine job of sharing that song with us. So, last week we had a conversation about earth care and being caretakers of the earth. And you were challenged to share with me some of the ways that you are doing just that, being a caretaker of the earth. So, I wanted to honor you sending me those things and share with everybody how some in our community are choosing to do so. So the first one is Elizabeth. Elizabeth shared with me that we're a little ahead. That's okay. Elizabeth shared with me that she has been doing things like paying attention to what's in her closet and repurposing those things that are in her closet. And she has made the commitment that she will shop in thrift stores and consignment shops before she ever thinks about buying anything else new. So I love that idea, Elizabeth. Thank you. Anita and Joyce. So Joyce and Anita went out last Sunday after hearing our service, and they decided to get into the energy of the trees. And so they went and did some tree hugging. So Anita and Joyce, thank you so much for that. I myself have been known to hug a tree, as I said last week, so I can appreciate that you took some time to do that last Sunday. And then Brian and Kathy sent a picture in showing about how they are recycling. And what I love about this picture is you can see the recycling of the grocery store bag. So one of the best ways that you can have an impact for utilizing bags when you go grocery store shopping is to actually reuse those grocery bags for other purposes. It stops you from having to buy a garbage bag, as Kathy and Brian's picture shows here. So thank you, Brian and Kathy, for that one. Marilyn shared a couple of things. Number one, like me, she uses her water bottle. So thank you, Marilyn, for using a water bottle and not using those plastic water bottles. And also that she has bought 100% compostable trash bags. So I didn't even know there was such a thing, but there you have it. Marilyn is using them, and maybe the rest of us can find some of those recyclable trash bags. And then there's Peggy, who has showing that she has a compost bin that she uses in her yard. So you can compost your food scraps in a compost bin like that. And a compost bin, of course, allows you to create fresh soil that you can add back into the ground. She has also been growing fruits and veggies from seeds. So, hey, that looks fabulous, Peggy. And we're so glad to see that you are starting some fruits and vegetables from seed. And then finally, we have a picture from Susan. And Susan shared how she has been choosing non-plastic personal products. So she's got items there that are not in plastic, but that are solid, like the shampoo and the soap and her toothbrush that's there that is not a plastic toothbrush. So thank you each and every one for the ways that you have been showing up as caretakers of the earth. And thank you as well for sending me those pictures. That was fabulous. So we're moving on today to a new 6-week series on our 12 powers. I have been talking on the 12 powers basically since I started leading spiritual community. I remember my first series was back in January of 2002, and I spoke about a power a week then. And then a couple of years later, I decided to focus on a power every month of the year. And I remember thinking, how will I ever find enough material to talk about a power for an entire month? But I did, and doing so helped me to deepen in my understanding and my practice of living into these 12 powers. And so I have continued since that time to, on occasion, share series on the 12 powers. We did so at Unity Spiritual Center a couple of summers ago, but we are revisiting them again. And so my thought in this series was that we would look at 2 powers at a time. And I reached out to my minister friends from Unity on our Facebook page and asked for some suggestions and found out about a brand new, written in 2015, brand new to me, book on the 12 powers called The 12 Freedoms that was written by Reverend Phil Pearson. And Phil Pearson and his wife Dorothy, longtime Unity ministers. Dorothy passed away a couple of years ago, but Phil is still here writing books, and I'm showing you the cover of the book, one, so that you know the book that I'm using, but two, because what Phil is doing in this book is he is relating the 12 powers to the tetrahedron that you see on the cover of the book. So a tetrahedron being a three-dimensional triangle, and on this three-dimensional triangle, he realized, and this comes from, by the way, from Buckminster Fuller, he realized in Buckminster Fuller's work on the tetrahedron that the 12 powers were present in the 12 different sides of the tetrahedron. So on the outside of the tetrahedron, he lists all of the active powers, and then he realized that there were 6 other powers available on the inside of the tetrahedron. So those are the more passive powers. We'll be talking about those as well. And Phil tells us in this book that according to Buckminster Fuller, this is the only form, a tetrahedron is the only form in the universe that can be turned inside out and still maintain its shape. So I wanted to show that to you so you had an image of what Phil Pearson has got in his mind as he's sharing these thoughts about our 12 powers. So before we get into our powers for today, I wanted to share with you some ideas from the book where we talk about in unity, God as this divine mind. And Phil goes into a great discussion about that in the book. As many of you know, I've shared so many times that that is my absolute favorite way of thinking about God, not as an anthropomorphic being, which of course we in Unity don't teach about, but more of an energy. And for me, that energy of this divine mind consciousness that holds it all, the vessel in which all of life, all of creation is held in this divine mind consciousness. But Phil goes on to share how different people have come to the same understanding of this mind. And so he shared with us, and I wanted to share with you from the book. This is a quote from the book, and it was written by Paul Davies, who is an Australian physicist. And this is what he wrote as an Australian physicist. Taken to its logical conclusion, it is possible to imagine a supermind existing since the creation, encompassing all the fundamental fields of nature and taking upon itself the task of converting an incoherent Big Bang into the complex and orderly cosmos we now observe. All accomplished entirely within the framework of the laws of physics. This would not be a God who created everything by supernatural means, but a directing, controlling, universal mind pervading the cosmos and operating the laws of nature to achieve some specific purpose. We could describe this state of affairs by saying that the nature is a product of its own technology and the universe is a mind, a self-observing as well as self-organizing system. Our own minds could then be viewed as localized islands of consciousness in a sea of mind. And again, that was written by Paul Davies, an Australian physicist. This idea of the God as divine mind is an idea that Unity has taken on and resonates with. Another place that you kind of hear that idea and that Phil Pearson brings into this book is the work of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And he talks about the work in the writing of The Phenomenon of Man, in which Pierre talks about the evolution of consciousness of humankind. So just to give you a little bit of information about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he was a Jesuit priest in the Catholic Church, but he was also a scientist. He was a paleontologist and a geologist. And he was also a philosopher. And from that place of philosophy, he wrote the book, The Phenomenon of Man. And in Pierre's study of the consciousness of man through this philosophy, he came to understand that there has been this evolution of consciousness, that just as we talk about in Unity, that consciousness has evolved over time. You might remember a couple of years ago, I talked about the evolution of consciousness recognized in the theory of spiral dynamics. And so Pierre de Chardin also looked at that. And he came to the conclusion through his study of this that the idea, for example, in Genesis of original sin just did not line up with his understanding of the evolution of consciousness. Very much like Father Richard Rohr, very much like Unity, he saw that this consciousness contained God. He called it Omega throughout all of creation, and that as creation evolved, this Omega point, this perfect idea was there all along, very much in alignment with Father Richard Rohr. Unfortunately, the writings that he did regarding this were discounted by the Catholic Church at that time, and he was ordered to stop teaching and ordered to China, where he worked as a paleontologist for a number of years. And it really wasn't until after his death that his writings were actually published, and the most famous of those being The Phenomenon of Man, in which he talks about these ideas of the omega point and the evolution of consciousness. And so Phil Pearson in this book very much takes those ideas from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin and the omega point of God, which is within all of creation, and recognizes that as what we in Unity call that divine idea of God within us, that Christ idea within us, and that we each have this Christ idea within us that is constant and that is supporting us in our evolution. And so Pierre Teilhard de Chardin talked about how we as human beings became the ones here on this planet, if you will, that has the ability to be reflective about our experience, that we evolved in consciousness to the point, and that is what the fall is representing in the garden. Once we have the understanding of good and evil, it became that point within us in which we could reflect then upon our experience in life, and that we are the species here upon this planet that is able to reflect on that. And so those are just some of the ideas coming from Teilhard de Chardin, that I wanted to share with you today. And then as we move through this series, I'll share with you some more, because he was very influential in these ideas that Phil Pearson is writing about. And so we begin with our first dyad, and Phil Pearson calls this the unifying dyad. It is the dyad of love and wisdom. And knowing that each of us has this love and this wisdom within us, that we were created good and very good, that we are all here to express that power of love and wisdom. And so I'm just reminding us all of that once more. You are good. You are very good. You have these 12 gifts, these 12 abilities within you that in Unity we call our 12 powers, that you are alive as an idea in that divine mind consciousness, and that you are invited to take on these ideas, live into these ideas, and recognize that you are fully supported here in this life to show up as that omega point of God here in the evolution of consciousness of humankind. Big ideas. Let's bring them down into something that we can relate to. So the first of the dyads is love and wisdom. And as I said, there's this idea that Phil has that one of the powers in the dyad will be the active power, and the second of the dyad will be the supportive power. So the outside of that tetrahedron and the inside of that tetrahedron. So love is considered the active power. Love, as you know, in Unity is the harmonizing power. Love is the thing that makes the world go round, if you will. And it is this idea of love as the harmonizing power that I want to start with. So we all have had experiences of love in our lives, and in the world, love is such an emotion that we can fall into and we can fall out of. It always amazes me when I think about it. I understand it, but it's just sort of amazing to me when I think about it. Here in our United States, we have a divorce rate of about 50%. And so I think about how we move from this place of love, and I love you and I'm committing my life to you, and then at some point falling out of love, and suddenly that love is gone, and that one that we thought we would be with and in love with forever is no longer even a part of our life. So I am not discounting that experience by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm wanting to share with you that that is different than the power of love. The power of love is unchanging. The power of love is in the absolute. The power of love cannot be fallen into or out of. The power of love is always present and active, and is the harmonizing power in our lives, drawing us to all of the experiences that we are going through in our life. So what does that mean? So the power of love as a harmonizing power is present as God, as that divine spirit within us. So you'll recall the question that Jesus was given And he was asked, so what is the greatest law? What is the greatest law? And you'll recall that there are 600 plus laws in the Jewish tradition. And so what's the greatest of those, he's asked. And Jesus's response is, it can be summed up in two laws. One, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your might. And the second is likened unto it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And upon these two laws rest all the other laws. In other words, if we could just keep these two laws in mind and practice them, everything else will fall into place. St. Augustine said, love God and do what you will, right? As soon as we get ourselves centered in that power of love, that love for God, that desire to know God in our life, that desire to experience God's power in our life, the desire to live that idea in our lives. This is what it is to love God. And once we've done that, once we've centered there, then everything else that we do will flow forth from that. So the power of love is first and foremost this desire and this intention that we hold to know God, to love God, to share that divine self that we are with all of the world. So there's been many teachers in Unity that have written about this idea of desire being from God. H. Emily Cady says that in her book, Lessons in Truth. She said, God has placed the desire in your heart. But many of us have desires that are focused externally. I'm desiring a new house. I'm desiring a new partner. I'm desiring a new car. I'm desiring a new job. Whatever that may be, the desire is out there for something that we think will fulfill some purpose within us. That would be a shallow desire that isn't. There's nothing wrong with those desires. It's not just that they're not deep and supported by the wisdom within us, right? So we want to move our desires to a deeper level, recognizing that those wants, those desires that we have for something out there will never be fulfilled until we first desire God. First desire to know that divine power and presence in our life. First desire to turn back to God. In the beginning, God, there's where we begin. First God. And so that commandment that Jesus gives us to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, speaks to that power of desiring God first. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all things shall be added unto you. So the power of love is grounded in this idea that I am desiring to know God in my life and to live from that place, loving others within my life, so that it's not about desiring to bring things to me, but it's desiring to have love flowing from me out into the world, to be the light, to be the life, to be the good that is God. Now, we also know that love without being grounded in wisdom can be very destructive in our lives. You might recognize things that you have longed for and loved that wisdom was not involved in the process at all. So that is why this unifying dyad is both love as that active, I am desiring God, I am moving in that direction, but it is countered with and supported by wisdom, which is our discerning power. Charles Fillmore calls wisdom the discerning power of the mind, or the judging faculty of the mind. Now, not judging in the sense of judging myself as greater than or less than something out there, but judging from the perspective that I have the power within me to know. I have the power within me to know what is mine to think, to say, to do. I have the power within me to know this. And as I center, as I get still, as I listen deeply within, I allow myself this opportunity to let wisdom be my guide. So I, standing here today as this unifying dyad of love and wisdom together, may not know exactly what I'm going to do to get from here to there. I don't have to know every step along the way, because that power of loving wisdom within me will guide the way. But I have to be willing in this moment to center in that power of love, that power of God, the power of the divine. Still myself, listen to that still small voice within, and then move, take action from that loving wisdom. So this is some of the reason why I shared with you a heart math technique, because heart math has been around for a number of years doing scientific study on the power of our heart. And some of these studies have showed us, for example, that the power of the heart, the electromagnetic field of the heart, is greater than the electromagnetic field of the brain. So this is a huge magnetic field. And that when we take the time to do that quick coherence technique, which was about entering into that heart space, about breathing into that heart space, and then allowing ourselves to come to an experience of love or joy or gratitude, what that is doing is grounding us into the love and wisdom that is there within us, leading the way. When we can get out of the stress, the anxiety, the frustration of whatever the current moment is. So you can use that quick coherence technique anytime to bring yourself back to that harmonious presence of love and wisdom, active and available to each and every one of us. So I wanted to share with you in that I have been doing my best to engage in that love and that wisdom. And love is, again, the harmonizing power. Wisdom is the power that helps us to discern. So many of you know that I was scheduled to leave this week for a 90-day sabbatical. I was going to be gone May, June, and July. And that inner love and wisdom that was guiding me way back in March said, I don't think this is going to happen come May, Joanne. And so at that point in time, listening to that inner wisdom, listening to that inner guidance, I made the decision to reschedule my sabbatical to June, July, and August. That seemed fair at that point in time. But as the weeks have progressed, there was that something within me that was just, I'm not sure that this is the right time for this. I'm not sure that this is good. And so as I have listened to that love and wisdom, I talked with our board of trustees. We had a board meeting a couple of Thursdays ago and brought to them this idea of what's happening with my sabbatical. And what I have to say about our board of trustees is that I'm so grateful for them and the love and the wisdom that guides them through leading this community. And really, they all agreed whatever I wanted to do was fine with them. And so Gary and I, in our own discernment, knowing that all is harmonized, all is well, made the decision last week that we are going to put off our sabbatical until 2021. And so I am here with you through the duration of this, however long this lasts, and then I will be with you when we come back together and celebrate service together again in Unity Hall. Now, I say all of this from this place of I've made peace with it, but I have to tell you that sometimes when you follow that love and that wisdom, there is something within me that wanted to say, no, I really need this and I really want this. But we have to return to what am I desiring? Well, first and foremost, I'm desiring to know God. First and foremost, I'm desiring to follow that Spirit of God within. And so first and foremost, I will do the will and the work and the way of God for me in my life. And that is to be here supporting you in spiritual community. So presencing dyad, love and wisdom. This is how I've been practicing it here in the last couple of weeks. And I'm inviting you to consider how you might practice it. How can you take these ideas of this dyad, the presencing dyad of love and wisdom, putting God first in your life, and then allowing wisdom to guide your way? That's our question. And so throughout this week, I'm going to invite you to take some time, put into practice that quick coherence technique when you recognize that you have moved to a place of anxiousness or fear or worry or doubt, to set the intention that this week, when I notice that I'm doing that, I'm going to pause for a moment. It doesn't need to take a lot of time. Put your hand on your heart. Breathe there. Imagine that breath moving through your heart and then bringing your attention to something that you feel a sense of gratitude for, a sense of joy about, a sense of unconditional love, and breathe there for a moment. And what I'm telling you is that that will activate the power of your love and your wisdom. And not only am I saying this, but the Institute of Heart Math is saying this to you. This is a scientific study that has been shown the power of our presencing dyad, love and wisdom. So this one's going to be a little harder to take a picture of and send it to me. So I'm asking you to send it to me in an email, revjoanne@unityspiritualcenter.com. Let me know how you're practicing that this week. And continue to send your pictures into me, and I will continue to look for creative ways to use that as I engage my love and wisdom and say, okay, how can I harmonize